to change. And what he said was, okay, that's fine, but you owe me a saw blade. So we've got to be willing to accept the things that the Lord brings into our lives. There was a fellow who was traveling out to the west to settle the west with a friend of his. He and his friend had already looked at a portion of land. He left his friend. He gave his friend a lot of money. He was going to go back out there. I think it was Oregon. And he was going to go back and he was going to purchase him this beautiful green pasture land that he wanted. And he said, please go out there and buy that for me. Here's the money. His friend went out, saw that land, really liked it, and bought it for himself. And then his friend arrived, and he said, did you buy the land for me? No, I kind of like that land, so I bought it for me. But don't worry, I took your money, and I used it to buy this land in the mountains. He looked at the land in the mountains. No greenery. Mountain country, rocky. And he said, thank you. Thank you. And he said, thank you to God. You see, that's a tough moment to be flexible, isn't it? What you wanted, what you trusted in your friend to do. But remember this, God writes the last chapter. And when we're flexible and we trust in Him and we thank Him, no matter what happens, then He is in control and He can change everything. And so what happened was, they found the richest gold mine in Oregon history in that land on the mountains. He became wealthier than he could even imagine. So, flexibility. God is leading us to flexibility. What if you want to live in the valley and yet God calls you to live in the mountains? Let's be flexible. And it was God's will all the time because He used that wealth to honor God and to change the world for the Lord. Okay, now let's take a look at Genesis chapter 13. And let's look a little more about the story of Lot and Abraham. Chapter 13, verses 12 and 13. Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. How often do we hear that little catchphrase? Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Now, I am going to give you my opinion to my earlier question. The earlier question was, let's compare Sodom and Gomorrah to Jesus eating with the sinners and the publicans and the tax collectors. Let's do a little comparative analysis here. Sodom and Gomorrah, horrible. Something to stay away from, not to pitch your tent toward. I don't care how the grass looks greener. You hear that saying, the grass looks greener. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. Well, even though the grass may be greener, we've got to be flexible. We've got to ask if that's where God wants us. The key is to be in His will. So Jesus was in God's will by eating with these sinners and publicans and tax collectors. And Lot was not in his will by pitching his tent towards Sodom. He made the wrong choice. We've got choices in life, and we've got to understand the type of people to avoid are the type of people that were in Sodom and Gomorrah. The type of people to befriend, to eat with, and to draw to Christ are the kind of people like the publicans and tax collectors. You see, they were just doing a job that many didn't like because of the way the setup was with the Romans and so forth. And so we see a difference there. The difference in loving the sinner and hating the sin. Love the sinner, don't love the sin. But we cannot put ourselves in a position that Lot did and pitch our tent towards Sodom. If God will change your direction, if your direction is headed towards Sodom and Gomorrah, He will lovingly show you the truth, and the truth will set you free. Okay, so Genesis chapter 17, we see in verse 11, and all ye circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt you and me. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man, child in your generation, he that is born of the house, or bought with money of a stranger, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and that is bought with money, must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man, child, whose flesh the foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people, and he hath broken my covenant. You see, we have a blood covenant. Did you know that babies, when they're 8 days old, is when their blood coagulates and they're able to handle this type of operation? God knew that, and that's why He gave the significant day of 8 days. Again, we want to do things God's way, and when we don't do things God's way, then things don't go well. Things don't go right. And so we notice the flexibility here. This was the first time this was ever asked. And it was asked of Abraham. And so this was a tradition that I believe is a good tradition that began. And I don't see any need to change that tradition. I think God gave clear direction on cleanliness and so forth. Genesis chapter 17, and then we continue on verse 15 to 20. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, thou shalt call her name Sarah, but not Sarah, but Sarah, her name shall be. And I'll bless her and give her a son also. Yea, I'll bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for the everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. Now let's think about this for a minute. What did Abraham think? He thought, well, God make a nation out of Ishmael. Let's do that. No, God's way was for him to have another son named Isaac. So he had to be flexible. His first thought was a laugh. He laughed at it. He laughed. This is crazy. I'm 100. You know how old he was when Ishmael was born? 86. So Ishmael was about 14 when Isaac was born. So he was 86 years old when he had that child. And it's like, wait a minute, what's the difference between 86 and 100? I'm kind of thinking, if you can do this at 86, why can't you do it at 100? You know, but Abraham wasn't thinking that way. Sometimes our way of thinking is wrong. And we need an adjustment from God. We have to be flexible to see how He's changing our thought patterns and how He wants us to see things His way. Okay, and now we move on to the Ebenezer. And we'll look at 1 Samuel 7, verses 10 and 11. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, all right, first of all, I'm going to set the stage a little bit. So here we have Samuel. Here's what's happened. Samuel was used by God to bring a wake-up call. Let me tell you something. In studying this passage, I found something I didn't know. So we know about